Alrighty, so today DJI dropped a massive upgrade for the Mavic 3 in terms of firmware. This new firmware brings in a slew of new features that we've asked for, and some features that we didn't know we needed. This update's going to work on the Mavic 3, Mavic 3 Classic, and the Mavic 3 Pro. With that being said, let's get started. What's good, everybody? Ken here, you're watching OriginaldoBo, and I'm gonna try to give you all of the nitty-gritty details in a very short period of time. So let's just jump right into it with the first new feature, which is the ability to tap into the obstacle avoidance cameras. So essentially, if you were flying and you were near a power line, a tree, and you didn't quite trust the obstacle avoidance, the only way you would know that you were in danger of hitting something is if you yawed around and looked to see how close you were to an object. But maybe you're filming something, you don't want to do that. Well, now you can have the ability to activate these obstacle avoidance cameras to see exactly what they are seeing. To do this, you'll need to swipe right on that little map in the lower left-hand corner of your application. This will activate the cameras. You'll notice there are 4 different arrows: left, right, forwards, backwards, and this will allow you to view the different obstacle avoidance cameras on the drone. There's 4 cameras, there's 4 arrows that correspond to those different cameras. The cameras are not stabilized and they are only in black and white. You can maximize the cameras and minimize these cameras while you're viewing, but just keep in mind, like I said, they are not stabilized and it is not the best quality, but it's enough to allow you to see whether or not you are close to something or if you're in danger of hitting something with your drone. It's a really unique feature, and it's something that I've used a couple of times already. Although I feel that the obstacle avoidance with the Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 Pro is pretty good, so I don't know how often you would actually use it, but if you're curious of what these cameras can see, you can now activate that directly from that lower corner. All right, let's talk about AR Return to Home. All right, so AR Return to Home is a really unique new feature that allows you to visualize your return to home point. Essentially what this does is the path that the drone's now taking to fly back to you if you hit the return to home or you have a disconnection is now visualized on the screen of your RC. You'll have this green pathway that outlines if the drone is ascending, descending, and the path that it's going to take. Now, this could be especially useful, especially if you're in the city and you have a disconnection and you are concerned that this drone may hit something. You can now visualize the return to home. So if it is in fact going to hit something, you can pause it and try to get closer to it to reconnect. Obviously, you always want to be flying where you have visual line of sight of the drone, but there are instances where this drone will disconnect and you're in an area where it's an urban environment and there could be obstructions that you could possibly hit. This is going to give you that peace of mind that the drone is going to come back in the safest possible path. It's really unique. I don't use return to home all that often, but I did find it very useful when coming back to me or just tapping return to home, knowing that it was going to avoid obstacles, and to see it visualized on the screen, I thought was pretty cool. Piggybacking off of AR Return to Home is the AR Home Point. I don't know if you've ever flown the FPV drone or the DJI Avata, but one of the cool features that the Avata and FPV drone have is this virtual sort of home point that is always on the screen. I can't tell you how many times I've been flying out by the Florida Flats where everything looks the same. And I'll be honest with you, I've lost track of where my drone is, and I've even lost track of where I am. And yes, you can obviously tap the little map at the bottom of your screen to navigate back to you, but then you're taking away of the visual that you have of your drone. Now what you can do is you can just simply spin around until you find the yellow home point where you took off and just navigate yourself back to that yellow home point. I think this is probably one of the coolest features, and a feature that I didn't think about I needed, but I've been using it with the FPV series of drones that DJI has, but I didn't think that it would be a huge thing to bring it over to the Mavic series. But it's something that I really like. I'm so glad that they brought this. It is such a handy, useful feature, especially if you're flying in an area where everything literally looks the same. All right, let's talk about the drone shadow now, because the drone shadow is something that they recently introduced. This is something that other manufacturers have had. Basically, if you have that camera all the way down 90 degrees, this will let you see the shadow of the drone so you can navigate safely down whether you're landing on a boat, whether you're trying to land through trees. This will give you a clear understanding on whether or not the drone is going to hit anything as it's coming down. I find that this is a useful feature, although most of the time when I'm landing, I'm typically landing in front of me or from the side, grabbing the drone out of the air. I don't use this very often, but there are situations where I have to punch up through the trees and then I have to come back down through those trees. So having that on the screen so I can sort of visually navigate through a very narrow opening is something that I can appreciate, and I'm glad that they did bring this over to the Mavic 3 lineup. All right, let's talk about the camera improvements because they went ahead and added a couple of new things to the camera. One thing will be available for the Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 Classic. The other thing will only be available for the Mavic 3 Pro, which I know will piss a lot of people off, but it's something we have to discuss. All right, so let's talk about framing guides. So a lot of us like to film Instagram Reels, TikTok videos. Vertical video is ruling the world right now. And I was really disappointed to see that the Mavic 3 Pro and the Mavic 3 didn't have any option for vertical video like the Air 3 did. But what DJI did go ahead and do is provide us framing guides for different formats of video. So now that you have these framing guides, you can activate them from underneath the camera settings to basically frame up your shot a little bit easier. One of the things I've always struggled with is when I'm filming Reels with my Mavic 3, I was always off just a little bit or not further enough back. And when you crop in on that footage, it just doesn't look quite as good as if you filmed it natively in the 9:16 aspect ratio. But now with the framing guides, I can make sure that the shot is perfectly framed. So when I take it back to the editor and I crop in that footage, I know it's going to be right and I don't have to sort of second guess it. Just want to be clear, it's not cutting or cropping for you. It's just giving you the guide so when you go back to your editing suite, you can go ahead and crop it to your desired requirements, but it doesn't crop it. It still leaves it where it's at. It's just a guide, but it's something that I think it's worth mentioning because we now have like CinemaScope, we have 4:3 aspect ratios. We have a bunch of different aspect ratios under there, giving you a lot more pro features, really sort of indicating as to why the Mavic 3 is a little bit different than everything else. It's definitely more geared for the professional. All right, let's talk about the other new feature, which we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think this is what's going to piss a lot of people off, which is now the 7x zoom lens now has D-Log M. However, asterisk, only on the Mavic 3 Pro. Now, speculation, I think it could possibly be because the Mavic 3 Pro has the better 7x lens. That's already been proving time and time again as we've done tests on this, that the quality is better of the 7x lens on the Mavic 3 Pro. Whatever changes that DJI made to the optics definitely show because it doesn't look like the Mavic 3 7x. So they brought D-Log M. D-Log M works really fantastic. I've been using it on a couple of different shoots when I have to get really super close to something but need to be far enough back from that object. I've been using the D-Log M with the Mavic 3. I actually just used it on a real estate shoot where there was a neighbor that had a zebra and the client wanted the zebra in the video. And the only way I can get close enough without spooking the zebra was to use the 7x lens. And I think it worked fantastically. And yeah, so D-Log M is now available on the 7x lens. So you can now match up all of your colors 1-to-1 from the 3x to the main lens to now the 7x lens. And that sort of rounds out the firmware update. I think it's fantastic that they're bringing some of these new features. Yeah, it's a little slower than I would like, but nonetheless, it's great to see. The Mavic 3 is almost 1.5 years, almost 2 years old. They're still updating it. They're still bringing new features as they roll out newer drones. We'll have to see what else they bring. Maybe they'll bring some of these features to some of the other drones like the Air 3. Love to see the virtual home point brought over to the Air 3. I think all of the drones should have the AR home point at the very least. I think that's a super helpful feature and definitely will help you if you are in a panic trying to navigate back to your drone. But anyways, what do you think of this update? Go ahead and download it. It is available today. It's, I think, 9:00 a.m. Eastern. So this update should be available. If you're not seeing it become available, it's probably because the servers are getting hammered. Give it some time and it should be available. Make sure you update your RC Pro as well. If you want to see this update be available, you have to update your RC Pro. You also have to update the firmware on the drone. If you just have the app, download the new app so that way you can see the new framing guides. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Stay original.
heard they checking for me, no one checking on me, so I had to go run up a check. I got the message on me, ain't no flexing on me, my attorney gon' call and collect. Blessings on blessings for me, my successes only made them envious, they got upset. I had to put all their egos in check. I want the money, the power, respect, and I heard you don't